I am
The
entitled to
provocative
half of
question
everything
could be,
undeniable, and that's the primary reflection.
is marriage one of the
Clear,
largest
there's
legal
clearly
transfers of
disparity.
wealth between men and women? The deeper argument is that a successful man's wealth can become intertwined with a spouse through marriage, shared property, inheritance, divorce settlements, business interests, and estate planning. But the same principle can work in either direction. Marriage can also transfer wealth from women to men. The important issue is understanding the financial consequences of relationships before entering them, rather than demonizing either sex. Marriage, wealth transfer, and the economics of choosing a partner. There is a conversation happening on social media about relationships that deserves a little more thought than the usual arguments about men versus women. You will see videos telling young women to choose wisely. You will hear people talk about finding a successful man, a man with ambition, a professional athlete, an entertainer, an entrepreneur, a businessman, or somebody who has already accumulated significant wealth. Sometimes the message is subtle. Sometimes it isn't. The message can sound something like this. Don't struggle with a man who has nothing. Find a man who has built something. And on the other side, you hear men being told, protect what you've built. Don't allow emotions to make financial decisions for you. Some people immediately turn this into a battle between the sexes. But maybe we should step back from the emotional arguments and look at something much more fundamental. Marriage is also an economic institution. Love may be the emotional foundation of a marriage, but marriage can have enormous financial consequences. That doesn't make women bad. It doesn't make men victims. And it doesn't mean every marriage is about money. It simply means that when two people legally combine their lives, they can also combine economic interests. And historically, one of the major mechanisms through which wealth moves from one person to another is marriage. Think about the young man who becomes successful. Maybe he is an athlete who signs a $50 million contract. Maybe he's an entrepreneur whose company becomes extremely valuable. Maybe he's a businessman who spends 20 years building a successful company. Maybe he's an entertainer who suddenly becomes extremely wealthy. Before the success, he may have had very little. Then something changes. The contract arrives. The company takes off. The investments start producing income. The lifestyle changes. And suddenly, the person isn't simply a young man anymore. He has become an economic asset. Now imagine that man gets married. The marriage isn't necessarily about money. He may genuinely love his wife. She may genuinely love him. She may support him emotionally, raise children with him, sacrifice for his career, manage the household, or help him through difficult periods. Those contributions have real value. But marriage can also create legal and financial relationships involving income, property, businesses, retirement assets, inheritance, and other forms of wealth. That's where the conversation becomes uncomfortable. Because social media sometimes presents relationships almost like financial strategy. Find the successful man. Find the man with potential. Find the man who's going places. Don't waste your youth. Again, there is nothing inherently wrong with wanting a financially responsible partner. Men do it too. Most people want a partner who is responsible, stable, ambitious, intelligent, attractive, trustworthy, or financially capable. The problem begins when we pretend that financial incentives don't exist. They do. And they exist for both men and women. The bigger question is, why aren't more people educated about the financial consequences of marriage? We spend years teaching people how to get jobs. We teach people how to apply for mortgages. We teach people how to invest. We teach people how to start businesses. But many people enter marriage without understanding how marriage can affect their financial lives. That's strange. Because getting married can be one of the most consequential financial decisions a person ever makes. Imagine a man who spends 20 years building a company. He starts with nothing. He works 12-hour days. He reinvests his money. He doesn't spend recklessly. He takes risks. Eventually, the company becomes worth millions. Then he gets married. Should his spouse automatically be viewed as someone attempting to take his wealth? Absolutely not. But should he understand the financial consequences of marriage? Absolutely. Those are two completely different statements. Likewise, a woman who spends 20 years building a successful career, saving money, purchasing property, and investing shouldn't be ashamed of protecting what she built. If she marries a man, she shouldn't automatically assume that love eliminates the need for financial awareness. This is not about distrust. It's about understanding reality. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing that because something is romantic, it cannot also be financial. But marriage can be both. You can love somebody and still understand contracts. You can trust somebody and still understand property rights. You can believe in forever and still understand estate planning. You can be deeply committed to somebody and still have conversations about money. In fact, those conversations may actually protect the relationship. Because financial conflict is one of the things that can destroy relationships. Now let's return to the social media phenomenon. There are entire corners of the internet teaching people how to identify wealthy partners. Some of the messaging is presented as empowerment. Don't settle. Know your worth. Choose a man who can provide. There is nothing inherently wrong with wanting a financially stable partner. But there is a philosophical question underneath all of this. Are we choosing people, or are we choosing economic outcomes? That's an important distinction. If someone says, "I want a responsible man who works hard and manages money well," that's a relationship preference. If someone says, "I want access to a wealthy man's lifestyle," we're talking about something different. And that distinction applies to men too. A man can pursue a wealthy woman because he genuinely admires her. Or he can pursue her because he sees her bank account as an opportunity. Both situations can look like romance from the outside. That's why we have to be careful about reducing relationships to gender stereotypes. The real issue isn't women. The real issue isn't men. The issue is incentives. Money creates incentives. Power creates incentives. Fame creates incentives. Status creates incentives. And the more valuable somebody becomes, the more important it becomes for that person to understand the motivations surrounding them. A young athlete who suddenly becomes worth tens of millions of dollars is no longer operating in the same social environment he lived in when he was broke. An entrepreneur who builds a multimillion-dollar company may discover that people treat him differently after the money arrives. A celebrity may suddenly have hundreds or thousands of people wanting access to him. That doesn't mean everybody around him is dishonest. But it means he should become more financially sophisticated. And the same thing applies to a successful woman. Success changes the environment around you. The mistake is believing that success only changes your lifestyle. It can also change your relationships. And that's where the concept of wealth transfer becomes important. Wealth doesn't only move through businesses and investments. It can move through families. It can move through inheritance. It can move through gifts. It can move through property. It can move through divorce settlements. It can move through business ownership. And it can move through marriage. But here's the part that often gets lost in online arguments. Wealth transfer isn't automatically exploitation. A spouse who spends 20 years raising children while the other spouse builds a career may have contributed substantially to the household's success. A spouse who relocates repeatedly because of the other's career may have made sacrifices. A spouse who manages the home may allow the other person to concentrate on earning. Those contributions have economic value even when they don't come with a paycheck. So when we talk about wealth transfer, we shouldn't automatically assume that one person is stealing from another. Sometimes wealth is being shared because two people built a life together. Sometimes wealth is being divided because the relationship ends. Sometimes wealth passes through inheritance. Sometimes assets were acquired before the marriage. Sometimes they were acquired during the marriage. The circumstances matter. That's why simplistic social media arguments are dangerous. They take something complicated and turn it into women take men's money. Or men don't want successful women. Neither statement explains reality. The deeper issue is that people should understand what they're entering into. If you're young and successful, understand your finances. If you're getting married, understand your finances. If you're starting a business, understand your finances. If you're accumulating property, understand your finances. If you're becoming famous, understand your finances. And don't wait until you're angry, divorced, or financially exposed to start learning. There's another uncomfortable truth. Sometimes people don't recognize the economic value of what they have until somebody else recognizes it first. A person may spend years building wealth while thinking about love, friendship, family, and happiness. Then suddenly society begins telling other people, "That's the person you should marry." At that point, wealth becomes part of the person's dating profile whether they like it or not. That's why financial intelligence becomes part of personal intelligence. You don't have to become paranoid. You don't have to assume everyone wants your money. You don't have to treat relationships like business transactions. But you should know what you're bringing into the relationship. And you should know what you're potentially combining with somebody else's life. Maybe the most important lesson is this. Don't confuse financial awareness with cynicism. Being financially aware doesn't mean you don't believe in love. Having a prenuptial agreement doesn't mean you expect your marriage to fail. Protecting assets doesn't mean you don't trust your partner. And wanting a financially responsible spouse doesn't mean you're materialistic. It means you're an adult dealing with reality. The same way we tell people to protect their health, protect their identity, protect their homes, and protect their businesses, people should also learn how to protect their financial future. Because money doesn't care about romantic intentions. Contracts don't care how passionately you felt when you signed them. And financial consequences don't disappear simply because two people once loved each other. That's why I think the conversation on social media needs to mature. Instead of asking, "How can women get wealthy men?" Or, "How can men prevent women from taking their money?" Maybe we should ask a better question. How should two financially responsible adults enter a marriage while respecting both love and economics? That's a much more intelligent conversation. Because marriage shouldn't be viewed as a financial extraction strategy. And it shouldn't be viewed as a financial blind spot either. Love is important. Trust is important. Commitment is important. But so is financial literacy. If you're building something valuable, understand its value. If you're marrying someone who has built something valuable, respect what they've built. And if somebody is marrying you, understand that you're not just combining emotions. You're potentially combining two financial lives. That doesn't make marriage less romantic. It makes marriage more real. At the end of the day, the goal shouldn't be to find somebody's money. And the goal shouldn't be to protect money so aggressively that you never allow anybody into your life. The goal should be to build relationships where both people understand what they bring to the table, and neither person sees the other simply as a financial opportunity. Because wealth is something you can lose. Money can disappear. Businesses can fail. Careers can end. Athletes retire. Markets collapse. But the habits that created the wealth, discipline, responsibility, patience, intelligence, and self-control, can stay with you. And maybe that's the real wealth worth protecting. Not just the money in the bank. The mindset that put it there. That's the conversation worth having.